Hi, my name's Sam from WTM Sydney, and I just wanted to share a recent experience I had about making a sort of a connection with the significance of Jeremy Griffith's explanation of the human condition. The context is I was listening to a song that I listen to fairly regularly by Billy Joel, and it's called Lullabye, Goodnight, My Angel. And the significance for me was how that song in my mind represents it's a metaphor of what Jeremy describes in Freedom Essay 30 about resignation, or called resignation, and that being the psychological event that we go through as adolescents as we try and grapple with the subject of the human condition. So I just wanted to read out a couple of the key lyrics from Billy Joel's song Lullabye, which is a beautiful song, by the way, and then just read a couple of extracts from Freedom Essay 30. So in the first verse it begins, "Good night, my angel, time to close your eyes and save these questions for another day. And I think I know what you've been asking me, and I think you know what I've been trying to say." And then at the start of the second, "Good night, my angel, now it's time to sleep, and still so many things I want to say. Remember all the songs you sang for me when we went sailing on an emerald bay, and like a boat out to the ocean, I'm rocking you to sleep. The water's dark, and deep inside this ancient heart, you'll always be a part of me." And then the next verse, "Good night, my angel, now it's time to dream, and dream how wonderful your life will be." And that's not obviously the full lyrics, but they're the parts that I just wanted to read. And obviously, one of the great benefits of this information, the explanation of the human condition, is being able to take something that's, if you like, a metaphor, or in this case, it's the lyrics of a beautiful song, and actually be able to interpret, well, why does it resonate? Why is it so special? And what's the deeper meaning and significance that it's getting at? And as Jeremy explains elsewhere in various freedom essays, that's the great art form, if you like, of art, in terms of actually alluding to some particular truth, but in a way that, while we're suffering from the human condition, that's not too direct, not too confronting and condemning. But the main element of that, the lyrics that I wanted to pick up, was just that concept of sleep, and that second verse that has "Good night, my angel, now it's time to sleep." And at least in my mind, I feel like what Billy Joel's referring to there in having a conversation with his child or a child is in this is like a philosophical connection, where being unable to actually talk about the human condition, but notwithstanding trying to empathise with the adolescence or the child's predicament of knowing what they're actually grappling with at a subterranean level is the human condition, but being unable to talk about that. And so there's this sort of alluding to a truth, but not being able to talk directly about it. And in Freedom Essay 30, which is absolutely awesome. If you haven't read it, I strongly recommend it, just as one of the many access points to what Jeremy's describing in terms of his explanation of the human condition. Just to dive into it, on page 8 of that particular freedom essay, there's this depiction by Goya, and the name of the painting, or the depiction, is "The Sleep of Reason Brings Forth Monsters." And Jeremy includes some commentary there from a Time magazine by an Australian art critic, Robert Hughes, and I'll just dive into it, and I'm not going to particularly put it in context, but Robert Hughes is quoted talking about the significance of him becoming aware of that particular painting as a young man. And so Robert Hughes is quoted as saying, "At 15, to find this voice of Goya's, in particular this painting, so finely wrought in the sleep of reason brings forth monsters, and yet so raw, public, and yet strangely private, speaking to me with such insistence and urgency, was no small thing. It had the feeling of a message transmitted with terrible urgency, mouth to ear. This is the truth. You must know this. I have been through it." And a few lines down, Jeremy says, the person slumped at the table with owls and bats gyrating around his head. And that's what we're seeing here. There are these bats gyrating around, and there's this fella here slumped with his sort of head in his hands on this desk. It reads on, the bats gyrating around his head perfectly depicts the bottomless depression that occurs in humans just prior to resigning to a life of denial of the issue of the human condition. And then a little bit further on, even the title is accurate, the sleep of reason, namely the deep thinking that occurs if we let our superficial reasoning slip does bring forth monsters. And I just like the parallels between the use of that word sleep and what Billy Joel was talking about in that in the song Lullabye. In particular, the lines where he says, and save these questions for another day. I think I know what you've been asking me. I think you know what I've been trying to say. And then further on, now it's time to sleep, and still so many things I want to say. And then there's this alluding to this forbidden topic where he says, and like a boat out on the ocean, I'm rocking you to sleep, i.e. I interpret that as undergoing this process of resignation where we let go of any deep thinking. The water's dark and in deep inside this ancient heart. So there's this sort of parallel for me of there's this dimension where that's why any deep thinking brings forth monsters, because you ultimately run into the subject of the human condition. And then a few pages over, Jeremy talks about the work of the Scottish psychiatrist Artie Lang. And this is an absolutely awesome quote. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what's interesting is Lang at one point says, the condition of alienation, of being asleep, of being unconscious, of being out of one's mind is the condition of the normal man. And then just over the page, Jeremy quotes from the band, the American heavy metal band With Life in Mind, and the lyrics from a 2010 album titled Grievances. And I'll just read these lyrics out, which are fairly horrifying. It scares me to death to think of what I have become. I feel so lost in this world. Our innocence is lost. I scream to the sky, but my words get lost along the way. I can't express all the hate that's led me here and all the filth that swallows us whole. I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to be part of all this insanity. And then further on, there's a reference. A world shrouded in darkness. Fear is driven into our minds everywhere we look. Trying so hard for a life with such little purpose, lost in oblivion. Everything you've been told has been a lie. We've all been asleep since the beginning of time. Why are we so scared to use our minds? And I think you can probably see the parallel that I'm drawing. It's just that there's this sort of that recurring theme of the use of the word asleep, and as being a metaphor for, if you like, more generally, our alienation in terms of this denial of our inner upset human condition and the blocking out from various other truths like our cooperative ancestry and what have you. But even particularly in our own lifetime, the process of resignation where we try and, if you like, find a bridging understanding, we try and actually make sense of the human condition, but failing the if you like, the knowledge or the ability to make sense of that. And because of the confrontation of dealing with, looking at and seeing the human condition within ourselves, it ultimately becomes untenable to try and keep asking those deeper questions. And for me, that's what Billy Joel's talking about as an adult to a child. There's that dimension there that Robert Hughes refers to of trying to convey this message that I've been there, as in trying to bring some, despite the inability to have a vocabulary to actually really empathise by way of actually bringing understanding to what the adolescence is going through. The best we've been able to do in a way is use a lullaby where we just try and demonstrate our love and empathy via a lullaby or a metaphor, to try and, I suppose, ease the psychological pain and suffering that we know that's going on with that process. That's as good as we've been able to do, and it's actually beautiful in a way. And I think for me that the parting comment is that what's amazing now, and particularly if you read that Freedom Essay 30, Resignation, what we're able to do now that the human condition's been solved, we've got the vocabulary, we've got the information, the knowledge to really actually talk about what's going on at resignation. And so rather than using metaphors or allegories or just trying to be empathetic, we're actually going to be able to have a real conversation with adolescents about what it is that they're going through psychologically. And over generations, that process of resignation might be necessary. And all the, if you like, thinking and feeling problems and limitations that go with resignation, which really is a sort of a psychological death. We do split off from our real selves. All of that and everything that goes with it, the destructive behaviour that goes with that, will also be ameliorated. So it's an unbelievable situation. And for me, when I hear the beauty of those lyrics from Billy Joel, it gives me context to just how unbelievably amazing and how powerful the information we've now got is in terms of with this explanation of the human condition. So as I say, that was just something that for me was, recently was quite moving, and a deeper connection with appreciating this information. And I hope you get something out of it, and look forward to maybe hearing similar experiences from yourself. Thanks for listening.